Netanyahu was dead man walking before Gaza conflict began. He's a man who made a gambit to take control of the Israeli judiciary so that he would not be charged with corruption charges. He's a corrupt individual, morally corrupt, politically corrupt. So he was dead man walking before this conflict started. This conflict allowed him to extend his political life by becoming a war prime minister, but he has fumbled this horribly. The only thing he's succeeded in is staying in power. He's lost this war, and now his war cabinet is collapsed. He's making a gambit to bring in even more right wing people to sustain this. But the bottom line is his political future is dark. It's over. So to say he's gained anything, he's basically destroyed whatever was left of his reputation. He will go down in history as, and this is ultimately where we are, the man who destroyed Israel, the man who is why there is no longer a state of Israel, because there will no longer be a state of Israel. Netanyahu has killed Israel. Israel can't continue to exist. It can't beat Hamas. It's lost the support of the world. It's losing even more support. You have a UN Security Council resolution supported by the United States against Israel. You have President Biden threatening to do things to Israel if he doesn't do this. But no matter what, the propaganda exercise, which was how Israel sold itself to the world and to itself, is finished. Israel's been exposed as a fundamentally morally corrupt state. The Zionist enterprise is one that's based upon apartheid and genocide. Two words that people were struggling to, you weren't allowed to say these words beforehand. Today, it's embraced by the world. It's an apartheid state, a genocide state. This is how Israel is defined. Its economy is in shambles. The only way the Israeli economy was going to be sustainable is if Israel normalized relations with its Arab neighbors and became an integral part of whatever economic miracle they were trying to do, whether you wanted to call it the India-Middle East Economic Corridor or some other version thereof. That's over. That's not happening. The Israelis find themselves, the Houthi have effectively blockaded the Israeli ports. They're not going to recover. Hezbollah and Hamas have shown that Israel will never live in peace, ever. That the skies of Israel can be filled with missiles at any time, and that's not part of the Israeli dream that people flocked to when they, when they took Aliyah. People are starting to leave Israel, and increasingly people will flee Israel because you can't live in Israel. It's unsustainable. Israel will be compelled because of international pressure to seek a two-state solution. In order to do this, though, Israel will have to solve a number of internal problems, one of which is the West Bank settlers. Those settlements will have to go. This will lead to a major fracture, political fracture, societal fracture in Israel. More people will flee Israel. Ultimately, what will happen is that the demographics of Israel will be altered such that it becomes impossible to speak of a two-state solution because the Israeli element of the two-state solution is so minimal that it has to become a one-state solution. And this is what will happen. Israel will cease to exist. It will be replaced by something called Palestine. In Palestine, there will be a Jewish component. There will be a Christian component, but it will be a predominantly Muslim component. That's the future of this region. And there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it. The trajectory of history is such that Israel has not only morally lost the right to exist, but they have practically lost the ability to exist over time. Because all the things that are required to keep the Zionist entity known as Israel alive and well and living are finished.
In your opinion, does Zionism care about the future of Israel? Because what they're doing right now, what they've been doing, is just against the future of Israel, any sort of brightness in the future of Israel. But the problem is, how do they see Israel and its future? Why they're doing this, in your opinion?
To really answer this question, and you know me, I'm not afraid of answering. You have to dig down into places nobody wants to go. You have to realize that Israel has always been a propaganda exercise, and not for the benefit of Israel. That Israel exists actually to empower um, elements that reside in other nations. That, and I'm very careful not to call it a Jewish conspiracy, because then that becomes literally, by definition, anti-Semitic. It's a Zionist conspiracy. And the Zionist conspiracy is to use the symbol of Israel, whether it was the potential of Israel leading up to the creation of Israel, or the reality of Israel afterwards, as a mechanism of political and economic empowerment around the world. In the United States, we have what we call the Israeli lobby. It's the Zionist element of it. It's used by a number of people for political empowerment here in America. Everybody, and I was one of them, always said, well, the Israelis have bought the American Congress. No, American Zionists have bought the American Congress. And they control the political, and they use Israel as a mechanism of empowerment. How else do you take a population of such small percentages and give them the political and economic influence that they have, far above the actual numbers that we're talking about? The Zionist enterprise has enabled it to do it. It comes in a number of ways. Norm Finkelstein has always talked about the Holocaust. What do you call it? The Holocaust. Basically, it's a scam. Not saying that the Holocaust didn't exist. No one's saying that. Of course it exists. It's horrible. Happened. Never again. I'm a firm believer of that. But to use the Holocaust as a mechanism of economic and political empowerment, and that's part of the Zionist entity. And in doing so, what they've done is they have destroyed their own history, because they're creating enough political animus that people, by attacking them, are indirectly attacking the memory of the Holocaust. They've trivialized the Holocaust. It should have been something that causes everybody to take pause, everybody to fall on their knees, everybody to cry and say, never again can this happen to not just the Jewish people, but any people. That's what, if you truly believed in this, you would do. And yet these people who want to turn this Holocaust memory into a justification for what they're doing in Gaza, it doesn't work that way. You've just destroyed the credibility of what you think you were trying to build here. But this and so what the Zionists have done now is they've made any talk of what I've just said, they label as anti-Semitism, hate speech, etc. It's not. The Zionists are the hate speechers. The Zionists are the intolerant ones. The Zionists are the ones who are on the wrong side of history. Not the Jews, the Zionists. But we deal in a world where people, we have a lot of ignorant people in the world today. And so it's very dangerous to talk about anti-Zionism without creating the conditions for anti-Semitism, because there are people out there who are unable or unwilling to differentiate between the two. And so then it becomes an attack on Jewish institutions, the Jewish faith. And this is the absolute wrong direction to go. You can't allow the animosity one feels towards the Zionist entity known as Israel to become anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish. And at the moment, I don't think the world is capable of making that distinction. So it's a very dangerous time for the Jewish people, very dangerous time for the Jewish people, because the Zionist entity has allowed the memory of the Holocaust to be sullied, to be diminished, to be forgotten, to be used, to be abused. And once you do that, and then you allow the creation, the ability of genuine anti-Semitism to rear its ugly head. I mean, I see this in social media. I fight back all the time I can. People, Scott Ritter's an anti-free speech person. No, I just banned you because you're hating on Jews. Pick on Israel all you want. But the second I start hearing people say, Jews this, Jews that, boom, you're done. You're gone. It's not about Jews. It's about Zionism. And they're two distinct things. Even though the Zionists try to say, no, it's all one and the same, it's not. It's two distinct things. But the hatred that exists in the world today towards the Jewish people because of the Zionists is real. And it's a scary, scary time. I would not want to be a Jew anywhere in the world right now. And I would implore any nation that has a Jewish population to bend over backwards to guarantee them the right to continue to practice their faith the way they want to practice their faith. They should feel free and secure in the practice of their faith, no matter how bad the situation gets regarding the Zionist entity of Israel. Jews should never be persecuted because of that. It's a big challenge to the world today. It's a big challenge here in America. I'm seeing ironically, the people that are most in agreement with what I'm saying are Arabs, are Muslims, who are saying this isn't about Jews, but the Christians are turning this into, because you have a segment of evangelical Christian society that support Zionism, not Jews, Zionism, because it helped create the conditions for Armageddon, the rapture, the coming of the Messiah, and they think the end of the world's a great thing. So they're willing to take this down that extreme path. But you have others who bring up, the old blood libels, Jews killed Christ, and things of that nature. And you're starting to see this discussion taking place, and you're like, stop it, stop it. And then people come to me and they say, well, you're promoting it by having this dialogue that you're having about Zionism and all that. You're the problem. You're the one creating the conditions. And I'm like, no. Israel is a problem. Israel as a nation state is a problem. The world sees it as a problem. They see it as an apartheid state and a genocidal state. How do we resolve that issue? I'm not advocating for the end of Israel. I'm saying that is the inevitable outcome of the direction that Israel has taken itself down, that Benjamin Netanyahu has taken itself down. That's what's going to happen. Do I think it needs to happen? Yes. I think that you can't speak of peace in the Middle East until you speak of a one-state solution to the Palestinian problem. But that in no way should be conceived by anybody as anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, just the opposite. The end of this artificial entity known as the Zionist state of Israel provides the greatest security for the Jewish people and the Jewish faith in the world, because it eliminates this seed of hatred that's been sown and is growing. And again, we live in a very dangerous time. If I were a Jew, I would be scared, rightfully so.
The United States is offering a defense treaty to Saudi Arabia to just normalizing the relationship with Israel. And on the other side, they want Saudi Arabia just to distance itself from China, just not prohibiting Chinese bases in Saudi Arabia. When you look at this offer on the part of the United States, why does Saudi Arabia need a defense treaty, in your opinion? Do they have any sort of enemy in that region? We know that they had some complications, some differences with Iran. And right now, it doesn't seem that they have it anymore. It's not the best way possible, but they're getting along with each other right now. And is this all about the normalization of the relationship with Israel, or is it about something else? We know that Saudi Arabia recently has put a sentence in that agreement with Israel that they want to have a Palestinian state. That's why they trying to remove this part that Saudi Arabia added to the agreement, or what's the reason behind this defense treaty?
I think you got to understand that every nation is a consequence of its own history, meaning that, we can sit here and look at things. Is there a reason for Saudi Arabia to be at odds with Iran? Is there Is it in Saudi Arabia's best interest to normalize with Israel? Da 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 da. And logically we could say, well, no, but then why are they doing it? Saudi Arabia, modern Saudi society, has as one of its foundational elements the agreement that was made between Roosevelt and King Saud back at the end of World War II. And that's evolved into a economic arrangement that originally was about Aramco and America there, but then the Saudis nationalized Aramco, became a Saudi money-making machine, but they needed American military support to back them up, protect them during the Cold War, protect them against regional threats, Iraq, Iran, etc. And then the role that Saudi Arabia played there, and it's not just as simple as talking about oil. We're talking about finances, the integration of all this money that Saudi Arabia made, the empowerment of the princes. We can't ignore that. Yes, there's a king. Yes, there's a crown prince. There's a whole bunch of princes out there who have a say in this too, and they have a lot of money, and that money's out there in banks, and they've been buying influence in the West. It's like anything. If you invest heavily into something, it's very hard to get out of that investment. Even when the investment starts to sour, you keep saying, well, I hope it stays on. Saudi Arabia has been investing in the West for a long, 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 long time. This transition to the East is happening because Saudi Arabia has become soured with the Western investment, but they can't just dump it overnight. That's impossible to do. And so Saudi Arabia will string the West along as necessary. I think a strategic decision has been made by Saudi Arabia. I mean, we know it has. They joined BRICS. That's not a tactical decision. That's a strategic decision. They didn't renew the 50-year petrodollar agreement with the United States. That is a strategic decision. They're taking payments in non-dollar denominations. That's a strategic decision. But you can't, until these strategic decisions start creating, centers of gravity that are sustainable, until the economic relationships with Eurasia have evolved to the point that they can be done independent of whatever happens with the West. You can't just walk away from the West. And so when the United States, where a lot of Saudi money still is, and a lot of, politically, a lot of the princes have grown up flying to London, flying to the United States. They own property everywhere. You can't just hit the off switch on that. So when the United States says, hey, we want to sit down and talk to you about something, the Saudis have to say, yes, of course, come here, sit down, let's talk. Let's talk. Oh, yes, we think this is a grand idea, a wonderful thing. Of course, we have the caveat that there has to be a Palestinian state. And you, America, you've said you want a Palestinian state, so we're on board with you. We too want a Palestinian state. So that's one of our conditions about this. But we'll talk about all this. But until there's a Palestinian state. Meanwhile, Israel say, there will never be a Palestinian state. What does that tell you about the agreement? Dead in the water. So I think that's what you're seeing. The Saudis are doing what any nation does in these circumstances. You play a diplomatic game. You wait until the time is right to make a major deviation. I don't see Saudi Arabia doing something that undermines the strategic decisions they've made to normalize relations with Iran, to join BRICS, to walk away from the petrodollar, and suddenly say, oh, well, what the hell? We'll just have a strategic, security arrangement with the United States. I just think this is the Saudis buying time. This is the Saudis sitting down, engaging in a delay tactic. Again, the Palestinian state is it's the fly in the ointment. And I don't see Saudi Arabia suddenly saying, well, yeah, okay, we don't support that anymore. The Saudis have put that condition out there, and that's the killer amendment. So I don't think this is serious talk. I think this is the Saudis buying time to get the changes made that orient them in the strategic direction that they're headed.
Yeah. Scott, just to wrap up this session, when you look at the conflict in Gaza, militarily. How do you find it right now? How successful was that? Is Israel getting to the point that would be ready to go after some sort of ceasefire?
The Israeli objectives have always been to destroy Hamas's ability to continue to resist and to destroy Hamas as a political entity. Israel has failed on both of those. Every day, Hamas is killing more and more Israelis. It's going to get worse for the Israelis, because they've created the ideal situation for Hamas, an anthill that is there. The Israelis don't know where it is. The Israelis have blown up the infrastructure on the top. So now the ants can start leaving the anthill, come out, start laying ambushes, come back to the anthill, blowing the Israelis up, the death by 1,000 cuts. How do you define a tactical victory? I mean, I'm always, I'm old school, the battle for Hill 881. Well, hell, we know what we need to do. Capture Hill 881. All right, boys, get online. Base of fire, right flanking maneuver, fire support, boom, boom. Flag on top of 881. We win. What are the Israelis putting a flag on? Put up flag on destroyed building 832. It's already been destroyed. Put a flag on it. Hezbollah don't care, or Hamas doesn't care. They're under their thing going, oh, they're up there? Okay. Hey, did you guys put a mine up there the other day? Yeah. Blow it up. Boom. Oh, there goes some dead Israelis. That's all Hamas is doing. Hamas doesn't have to evict Israel to win. Hamas doesn't have to seize territory. Hamas wins just by killing Israelis. And they do that every day in increasing numbers. Hamas planned this conflict out. Israel is playing the game that Hamas designed, and Israel doesn't even know the rules. So they say, we'll play that game. Well, you can't do it. Why? We don't know the rules. What is the game we're playing? It's called Kill Israel. Oh, we don't like that game. Too late. You're in it. It's the same game they'll play with Hezbollah if they ever decide to go into full-scale war with Hezbollah, a game that they'll lose because Hezbollah has been imagining this conflict for decades, and they're ready. Israel's not. Israel hasn't imagined this. So militarily, it's over for Israel. They can continue to send tanks and armored personnel carriers and drones and planes and bombs, but they're not winning. They're losing. That's the reality of it.
Yeah. And Turkey, Scott, just talking about Turkey, do you see Turkey considering the situation in Gaza, or they're playing a political game as they're doing in Ukraine?
In the local elections, Erdogan's party, the AKP, lost ground not only to the secular parties, but a lot of the Islamist parties that used to be part of the AKP umbrella jumped out and said, no, we're running separately so that the AKP doesn't benefit from their numbers in parliament. They're running separately because of what Israel's doing in Gaza, what Turkey's doing in Gaza, what Turkey's not doing to support the Palestinians. So there is a price to pay. So that's when Erdogan did the sanctioning. I'm sanctioning 56 different things. He didn't sanction the oil, did he? So Erdogan's the great survivor. He's looking out what's best for Turkey. We see this. I mean, we see the direction he's going. The European Union has always, look, some of the strategic decisions he's made. He wants Turkey to be a regional energy hub, which means that not only do pipelines go through, but he now has storage capacity. He can influence the market. He is the influencing. They will start pricing gas based upon the Istanbul index or something of that nature. So in order to do that, he has to maintain connectivity with, different regional suppliers and consumers. And Israel has the potential of becoming a major regional supplier. And what you want to do is ensure that if Israel ever gets that gas up and running, that it goes through the Turkish energy hub. It doesn't create an alternative in Greece or something like that. So in order to do that, you have to have connectivity with Israel. as Israel becomes less and less economically viable, as Turkey sees the writing on the wall, you'll see that they're willing to pay less and less a price for sustaining relations with Israel, but they're not there yet. The other thing about the energy hub is that its focus was towards Europe, but now Erdogan has made a decision that he's looking at BRICS, and once he makes that jump to BRICS, that changes the political and geopolitical dynamic as well. So I think Erdogan is a survivor. He will make adjustments as necessary based upon domestic politics, like all politicians have to do. But ultimately, he's in a very unique situation as sort of this bridge between East and West, between Europe and Asia. And he growing recognition that Europe doesn't want him. Europe doesn't like him. They don't like the Turks. That the Turkish identity isn't a European identity. It's a Eurasian identity. It's an Asian identity. But again, like we talked about with Saudi Arabia, Turkey has spent, since the founding of the Turkish Republic in 1922, I guess, or 24, around there, Turkey has been aligned with the West. It's a NATO member, sought European Union membership. It's been institutionalized by the West. It takes time to wean yourself off of that, reorient yourself. Turkish involvement in BRICS will help, because what happens if Turkey becomes a member or a member in waiting, it'll get plugged into this growth that's happening in BRICS, the institutionalization of the BRICS concept. And now Turkey will be there, and decisions that have outcomes now will become knowable to Erdogan. So it won't be just the theory, what happens if we do X? They're now plugged in, and his foreign ministry can sit down and say, this is what's going to happen. This is the outcome. And he can begin to unplug from Europe and make the move that he wants. A lot of people criticize Erdogan, but he's been put in a very difficult situation. He's a survivor politically, but he's also trying his best to have Turkey emerge from this global transition period away from the American hegemon into a multilateral environment. If you're going to gravitate away from the American hegemon, then Turkey has to likewise gravitate away from the American hegemon, which means that it can't become, just a subset of the European Union. It can't just become the southern flank of NATO. It needs to develop its own identity. And as BRICS matures, as the SCSO matures, as Eurasia matures, I think Turkey is going to become a very critical part of that, and it will unplug. And that'll impact some of the decisions that Erdogan makes, to include whether or not he wants to continue to serve as the facilitator of the transfer of energy from Azerbaijan to Israel.
Yeah, when they're talking about they're not going to confront Russia if NATO goes to fight Russia, do you find them honest in what they're talking about?
Well, Turkey's not going to fight Russia. Turkey's not suicidal. And the interesting though is that when Stoltenberg starts throwing out numbers, 500,000. How many of those are Turkish troops? Oh, but what if you don't have the Turkish troops? You don't have 500,000 anymore. So quit throwing out fake numbers. Turkey's not going to war with Russia, not over Ukraine. That's a certainty.
Yeah. Just out of this discussion, how do you find the situation right now? I talked with Jill Stein. She's a very good candidate, in my opinion, to be part of this election. You talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a very good candidate, I think, when it comes to the conflict in Gaza, when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine.
When it comes to America, he doesn't know the Constitution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you see a third party? Is that possible, in your opinion? How do you see Jill Stein, Cornel West, these people who are trying to make a movement?
I think that America as a nation has been a two-party system, and our entire way of the entire establishment is geared around it. the way we operate economically, all the political decisions that are made. We are a nation that is really a single party of the establishment, where we have two political parties that are playing games on, what color hat's going to be on top of the establishment. And we're seeing that this has become a sort of unsustainable model. But there is no history of a viable third party in America. And these two candidates, I like Jill Stein. I've met her. She's a nice lady. I never met Cornel West, but he's an intelligent man. They have no chance. Them, because a third party becomes it's not an institution. It becomes a party. Ross Perot, created a movement. Ralph Nader. When you say Jill Stein, well, Jill Stein what? Jill Stein of the Green Party? There is no Green Party. Even the Green Party doesn't agree on everything. So there's no establishment backing up these third-party candidates. And until we disenfranchise the two existing parties, and the way to do that, honestly, it has to be take money out of politics. When we take money out of politics, then the parties are they exist to raise money. That's it. Raise money for elections. And then they get involved in the game of you give me money, influence, power, the corruption of American politics. We take money out of politics, we disenfranchise, we remove the reason for these two parties to exist. And now we empower the people who then can gravitate away from these two parties towards candidates that matter. And then it's not necessarily, I don't talk about a third party. I say we have a chance for independent leaders to come in. And that's the future, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
We got to get money out of politics.
Yeah.